The only time the system tried to oppress me. Whitney Houston never forgot their racism, and she fought for justice. The voice of an angel, the weight of a nation. The year was 1985, and a phenomenon was born. From the hallowed halls of New Hope Baptist Church in Newark, New Jersey, emerged a voice so pure, so powerful, it seemed to defy earthly bounds. Whitney Elizabeth Houston, daughter of gospel legend Cissy Houston and cousin to Dionne Warwick, was not just a singer. She was a force of nature, a vocal prodigy destined for greatness. Her debut album, Whitney Houston, shattered records, selling over 25 million copies worldwide and spawning 3 number-one singles. She was young, beautiful, and possessed an undeniable charisma that captivated audiences across the globe. She was America's sweetheart, a global icon in the making, and the music industry had never seen anything quite like her. But beneath the glittering surface of her meteoric rise, the insidious tendrils of systemic racism were already at play. Whitney, a young black woman from a lineage of formidable black artists, was being packaged and presented in a way that was meticulously calculated to appeal to the broadest possible audience, an audience that, in the 1980s, was still largely perceived by industry gatekeepers as predominantly white. Her sound was pop-oriented, her image polished and sophisticated, often described as crossover. While this strategy undeniably propelled her to unprecedented heights, it also sowed the seeds of a painful racial dilemma that would plague her throughout her career. Early on, the racism was subtle, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye, yet deeply felt by Whitney and those closest to her. It manifested in the language used to describe her music: too pop, not black enough. It was in the subtle pressure to downplay her gospel roots in certain interviews, to soften her edges, to conform to an idealized, non-threatening image. She was often praised for her universal appeal, a backhanded compliment that implicitly suggested her blackness was something to be transcended rather than celebrated. The industry, in its quest for maximum profit, was inadvertently, or perhaps intentionally, creating a wedge between Whitney and a segment of the black community who felt she was being whitewashed. Whitney, with her innate grace and unwavering professionalism, navigated these early challenges with remarkable composure. She understood the game, having grown up in the music business, but she also believed in the power of her voice to unite, to transcend. She genuinely loved all kinds of music, and her artistry was a reflection of that expansive spirit. Yet, the constant questioning of her authenticity, the subtle racial undertones in critical reviews, and the unspoken expectations placed upon her began to chip away at her spirit. She was carrying the weight of being a trailblazer, a black woman achieving unparalleled mainstream success, and with that came the burden of representation, whether she asked for it or not. Her early interviews reveal a young woman eager to please, yet fiercely proud of her heritage. She spoke of her family, her church, her roots, but the narrative around her often focused on her ability to cross over, as if her talent was a bridge rather than a destination in itself. This narrative, while seemingly innocuous, was a product of a system that still viewed black artists through a racial lens, often categorizing them into specific genres and limiting their mainstream appeal unless they conformed to certain expectations. Whitney was breaking those molds, but not without resistance, both overt and covert. The pressure to be everything to everyone, to be both black enough for her community and universal enough for the mainstream, was immense. It was a tightrope walk that few artists could manage, and it was a burden placed disproportionately on black artists who dared to venture beyond prescribed racial boundaries. Whitney, with her extraordinary talent, made it look effortless, but behind the scenes, the struggle was real. She was a beacon of hope and inspiration for millions, but she was also a young woman grappling with the complex racial dynamics of an industry that celebrated her voice while subtly trying to define and confine her identity. As we delve deeper into Whitney's journey, we'll uncover the moments when these subtle pressures escalated into undeniable confrontations with systemic racism. Her story is not just about a voice. It's about a spirit that refused to be broken, a dignity that remained intact, and a fight for justice that resonated far beyond the stage. If you're moved by stories of resilience and courage, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more untold narratives of iconic figures. As Whitney Houston's star continued to ascend, the subtle racial undertones of her early career began to solidify into more tangible, albeit still often unspoken, barriers. The invisible walls of systemic racism, though not always visible to the casual observer, were a constant presence, shaping her experiences within the music industry, the media, and even among segments of her own audience. Despite her undeniable superstardom, her talent and success were often filtered through a racial lens, creating a unique set of challenges that few of her white contemporaries ever faced. One of the most pervasive forms of discrimination Whitney encountered was the constant scrutiny of her authenticity within the Black community. While she was breaking sales records and topping charts globally, a vocal minority within the Black community criticized her for being too pop, too white, or not Black enough. This criticism, often fueled by media narratives that pitted her against more overtly R&B or hip-hop artists, was a direct consequence of the systemic pressures placed on Black artists to conform to specific racial archetypes. If a Black artist achieved mainstream success by appealing to a broad audience, they were often accused of abandoning their roots, a charge rarely leveled against white artists who crossed genres. This internal division was a painful manifestation of external racist structures. The music industry, historically, had segregated artists by race, creating race records and distinct radio formats. When Whitney transcended these artificial boundaries, she inadvertently became a lightning rod for these unresolved racial tensions. She was caught between a mainstream industry that wanted to market her as a universal, racially ambiguous talent and a segment of her own community that felt she was being co-opted. This wasn't just about musical preference. It was about identity, representation, and the deep-seated pain of a community that had seen its cultural expressions appropriated and diluted for mainstream consumption. Beyond the authenticity debate, Whitney faced more direct forms of industry discrimination. While she was the biggest female artist in the world, there were instances where her creative input was subtly undermined, or her artistic choices questioned in ways that suggested a lack of trust in her judgment, perhaps stemming from racial biases. Executives, often white men, might have felt they knew best how to market a Black female artist, even one as successful as Whitney, leading to subtle power struggles over her image, sound, and even her personal life. The pressure to maintain a clean image, for example, was arguably more intense for Whitney than for many white pop stars of her era, reflecting a societal expectation for Black women in the public eye to be beyond reproach. Media coverage also played a significant role in erecting these invisible walls. While she was lauded for her voice, there was often an underlying narrative that focused on her crossover appeal as something exceptional, rather than simply recognizing her talent. Her personal life, particularly her relationship with Bobby Brown, was subjected to an intense, often racially charged, level of scrutiny that seemed disproportionate to that of other celebrity couples. The media often painted Bobby as a bad boy from the streets, and Whitney as the angel who had fallen, a narrative steeped in racial stereotypes about Black men and women. This constant barrage of negative press, often with racial undertones, contributed to the public perception of her and added immense pressure to her already demanding life. Even in seemingly innocuous settings, the invisible walls could be felt. At industry events, in high-end establishments, or during international tours, Whitney, despite her global fame, would sometimes encounter subtle microaggressions, dismissive glances, assumptions based on her race, or a general sense of being an other in spaces that were still predominantly white. These experiences, though not always headline-grabbing, accumulated over time, reminding her that even at the pinnacle of success, her Blackness was an inescapable part of her identity that the system was constantly trying to define, control, or, at worst, diminish. These invisible walls were not just about individual acts of prejudice. They were systemic, embedded in the structures and expectations of the entertainment industry and society at large. They forced Whitney to constantly navigate a complex racial landscape, to defend her artistry, her identity, and her choices. It was a heavy burden, one that she carried with remarkable strength and dignity, even as it took its toll. What are your thoughts on the subtle ways systemic racism can manifest, even for someone as successful as Whitney Houston? Let us know in the comments below. The year 1989 marked a critical turning point for Whitney Houston, a moment when the invisible walls of systemic racism became undeniably visible, personal, and profoundly painful. It was at the Soul Train Music Awards, an event meant to celebrate Black excellence in music, that Whitney experienced a public humiliation that would forever alter her perception of her place in the industry and her relationship with her audience. This was not a subtle slight from a white executive or a racially coded critique from a mainstream journalist. This was a direct, visceral rejection from a segment of the Black community, fueled by narratives that had been meticulously crafted by the very system she was trying to navigate. Whitney was nominated for several awards that night, a testament to her continued dominance. As her name was announced for one of the categories, a smattering of boos erupted from the audience. It wasn't a roar, but it was distinct, audible, and utterly devastating. The boos were not for her talent, which was universally acknowledged, but for what she represented to some, an artist who had supposedly sold out to the mainstream, who had abandoned her R&B roots for pop stardom, and whose image was deemed too white or too vanilla. For Whitney, who had always strived to bridge divides with her music, this public rejection was a brutal blow. She had grown up in the heart of Black culture, steeped in gospel and soul. Her family was a pillar of the Black music community. To be booed by her own people at an event dedicated to Black music felt like a betrayal of the highest order. It was a moment of profound emotional pain, a public shaming that cut her to the core. She later recounted the experience with raw honesty, stating, "I got booed at the Soul Train Awards. I was like, why am I getting booed?" The answer, she realized, lay in the insidious nature of systemic racism, which had created a no-win situation for her. The boos were not just about Whitney. They were a symptom of a larger problem. The music industry's historical segregation of Black artists, its tendency to market them differently, and the constant pressure to cross over had created a deep-seated resentment within parts of the Black community. When an artist like Whitney achieved unprecedented mainstream success, some viewed it with suspicion, believing she had sacrificed her cultural identity for commercial gain. This narrative, while unfair to Whitney, was a direct consequence of a system that forced Black artists to choose between mainstream acceptance and cultural authenticity, a choice rarely imposed on white artists. In that moment, standing on that stage, Whitney understood with chilling clarity that the system wasn't just trying to define her, it was trying to divide her from her own people. It was a realization that the very success she had achieved, celebrated globally, was being weaponized against her within her own community. The pain was immense, but so was the clarity it brought. This wasn't just about individual prejudice. This was about a deeply entrenched system that created impossible expectations, fostered division, and ultimately sought to control the narrative of Black artistry. The incident at the Soul Train Awards was a crucible for Whitney. It forced her to confront the racial politics of her career head-on. It was the moment she realized that no amount of talent, no number of records sold, no degree of global adoration could fully shield her from the racial dynamics that permeated society. It was a stark reminder that even as a superstar, she was still a Black woman navigating a world that often sought to diminish or categorize her. This pivotal experience ignited a fierce resolve within her. She would no longer passively accept the narratives imposed upon her. She would fight back, not with anger, but with an unwavering commitment to her truth, her art, and her identity. This moment, though painful, became a catalyst for Whitney to reclaim her narrative and use her platform with even greater purpose. If you appreciate stories of artists overcoming adversity, give this video a thumbs up. The sting of the Soul Train Awards boos, though deeply painful, forged a new resolve within Whitney Houston. It was a turning point where she decided that she would no longer allow the system to define her, nor would she let external pressures dictate her artistic or personal identity. From that moment on, Whitney began to subtly, yet powerfully, push back against the machine, using her immense platform to assert her truth and fight for justice, not just for herself, but for her community. Her response wasn't always overt protest or fiery speeches. It was often more nuanced, embedded in her artistic choices and her public persona. One of the most significant ways she fought back was through her music itself. Her subsequent albums, particularly I'm Your Baby Tonight, 1990, and My Love Is Your Love, 1998, saw her embracing a more pronounced R&B sound, collaborating with Black producers and artists like L.A. Reid, Babyface, and Missy Elliott. This was a deliberate statement, a reclamation of her roots, and a clear message that she was not abandoning her heritage for mainstream appeal. Songs like My Name Is Not Susan, 1991, could be interpreted as a metaphor for her struggle with identity and the pressure to conform, a powerful assertion of self. Beyond her music, Whitney used her visibility to champion Black talent and culture. Her film roles, particularly in Waiting to Exhale, 1995, and The Preacher's Wife, 1996, were significant. Waiting to Exhale, an all-Black female ensemble film, was a cultural phenomenon that celebrated Black womanhood and sisterhood. Whitney not only starred but also executive produced the soundtrack, which became one of the best-selling soundtracks of all time, featuring a host of prominent Black female artists. This was a powerful act of defiance against a Hollywood system that often marginalized Black stories and talent. She was actively creating opportunities and showcasing the richness of Black artistry on a global stage. Whitney also became more vocal in interviews, albeit in her dignified and composed manner. She spoke more openly about the challenges she faced as a Black woman in the industry, the pressures to conform, and her unwavering pride in her heritage. She didn't engage in sensationalism, but her quiet strength and unwavering conviction spoke volumes. She became a symbol of resilience for many, demonstrating that one could achieve unparalleled success without sacrificing one's identity or integrity. Her marriage to Bobby Brown, though often tumultuous and heavily scrutinized by the media, was also, in a way, an act of defiance. In a society that often policed the relationships of Black celebrities, particularly successful Black women, Whitney chose a partner who was unapologetically Black and rooted in a different, more raw aspect of Black music culture. While their relationship had its own complexities, it was a powerful statement against the vanilla image the industry had tried to craft for her. She was choosing her own path, on her own terms, regardless of public perception or industry expectations. Furthermore, Whitney's philanthropic efforts, though often understated, were significant. She supported numerous charities, many of which focused on issues affecting the Black community, such as the United Negro College Fund and various AIDS awareness initiatives. She understood that her success came with a responsibility to uplift others, and she quietly used her resources to make a tangible difference. Whitney's fight against systemic racism was not a single battle, but a continuous campaign waged through her art, her choices, and her unwavering commitment to her truth. She demonstrated that dignity and grace could be powerful weapons against oppression. She refused to be silenced, refused to be defined by others, and in doing so, she paved the way for countless artists who followed. Her resilience in the face of such immense pressure is a testament to her extraordinary character. If you find inspiration in stories of individuals standing up for what's right, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell to join our community. Whitney Houston's journey, marked by unparalleled vocal brilliance and a relentless battle against systemic racism, left an indelible mark on the world. Her fight, often waged with quiet dignity and artistic assertion rather than overt confrontation, reshaped the landscape for Black artists and left a legacy of courage that continues to inspire. She proved that a Black woman could achieve global superstardom on her own terms, even when the system tried to box her in, define her, or diminish her authenticity. Her impact on the music industry was profound. By breaking down racial barriers and achieving unprecedented crossover success, Whitney opened doors for a generation of Black artists who followed. She demonstrated that Black talent was not limited to specific genres and that Black artists could command universal appeal without sacrificing their cultural identity. Her success forced the industry to reevaluate its marketing strategies and its narrow perceptions of what constituted a mainstream artist. She showed that Black excellence, when given the platform, could transcend all boundaries. Yet, Whitney's story also serves as a poignant reminder that the battle against systemic racism is an ongoing one, with many unfinished chapters. Despite her groundbreaking achievements, the entertainment industry and society at large continues to grapple with issues of racial bias, representation, and equitable treatment. The pressures she faced, the scrutiny of authenticity, the racialized media narratives, the subtle attempts to control her image, are still experienced by Black artists today, albeit in different forms. Her experiences highlight the insidious nature of systemic racism, which adapts and evolves, but rarely disappears entirely. Whitney's personal cost in this fight was immense. The constant pressure to navigate racial expectations, the relentless media scrutiny, and the internal struggle to maintain her identity in the face of external definitions undoubtedly took a toll on her mental and emotional well-being. Her later struggles, often sensationalized by the media, can be viewed, in part, as a consequence of the immense weight she carried, the weight of being a trailblazer, a symbol, and a target in a racially charged landscape. She was a human being, not just an icon, and the battles she fought left scars. However, her enduring legacy is one of triumph and resilience. Whitney Houston taught us that true power lies not just in talent, but in integrity and an unwavering commitment to one's truth. She showed the world that dignity is a formidable weapon against oppression, and that one's voice, in all its forms, can be a powerful instrument for change. Her refusal to be silenced, her embrace of her heritage, and her consistent pursuit of artistic excellence were all acts of resistance against a system that sought to control her narrative. Her music continues to resonate, not just for its unparalleled vocal artistry, but for the spirit of strength and vulnerability it embodies. When we listen to Whitney, we hear not just a voice, but the echo of a woman who stood tall against immense pressure, who fought for her right to be seen and heard on her own terms, and who, in doing so, paved the way for countless others. Her story is a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to overcome adversity and to demand justice, even when the odds seem insurmountable. Whitney Houston's life was a testament to the fact that while the system may try to oppress, it cannot extinguish the fire of a truly courageous spirit. Her fight for justice, though not always loud, was always present, woven into the fabric of her extraordinary career. It is a legacy that challenges us to continue the unfinished battles, to dismantle the invisible walls, and to ensure that every voice is heard, respected, and celebrated, free from the shackles of systemic racism. Show your support by liking this story and sharing it to keep Whitney's legacy of courage and justice alive.